You have betrayed this entire family, Adrian!
I have the evidence right here.
How can you be so calm when everything is your fault?
The slap echoed across the conference room before anyone spoke. My younger brother's palms still hung in the air, trembling, while dozens of executives stared at me as if I had become the villain overnight. "You've ruined us," Ethan shouted, his eyes bloodshot. "How long were you planning to hide this?" I slowly touched the corner of my mouth. Blood, not because of the slap, because I had bitten the inside of my cheek to stop myself from saying what I had protected for 10 years. At the head of the table, my father didn't even ask if I was hurt. He adjusted his cufflinks. "Adrian," he said coldly, "hand over your executive authority." Silence swallowed the room. My fingers tightened around the leather folder containing every emergency plan I had prepared over the past decade. I looked from one familiar face to another. Board members, department heads, people whose careers I had saved, people whose children I had quietly paid scholarships for. Not one of them met my eyes. "We're waiting," Father said. The projector behind him displayed one brutal headline. "Lumina Group faces criminal investigation." Gasps spread through the room. Ethan pointed directly at me. "He's been controlling every financial decision. If anyone is responsible, it's him." A murmur of agreement rolled around the table. No, not agreement. Relief. They had found someone to throw into the fire. I opened the folder. Inside were documents proving I had warned them for months that Ethan's reckless overseas expansion would destroy the company. Every signature, every rejected proposal, every recorded meeting. One sentence from Father echoed in my memory. "Family comes before pride." For 10 years, I had believed him. I slowly closed the folder again. The clicks sounded louder than Ethan's slap. "I'll resign." The room froze. Ethan frowned. "What?" I said, "I'll resign." Father leaned forward. "Just like that." I nodded. "You always wanted someone else to carry this company." I looked directly at Ethan. "He has it now." Something flickered in my brother's expression. Not triumph. Fear. Outside the building, rain crashed against the marble steps. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Rowan, did you steal company funds? Are you running away? Did your family abandon you?" Security guards pushed cameras aside. I walked through them without answering. My phone vibrated. "Mother." I answered after the fourth call. "Adrian." Her voice shook. "You can't resign." "I already did." "You know your father's temper." "I do." "You'll apologize." I looked up at the gray sky. "For what?" "You embarrassed the family." A laugh escaped before I could stop it. Not loud, not bitter, just tired. "I embarrassed the family? You know what I mean." "No, I don't anymore." She became silent, then quietly asked, "Where will you go?" "I don't know, but I won't be coming back." I ended the call. Rain soaked my suit within seconds. For the first time in 10 years. No one expected me to solve anything. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt strangely light. My apartment wasn't home. It never had been. Every piece of furniture had been chosen because I was never there long enough to care. The refrigerator contained bottled water, coffee, medicine for headaches. Nothing else. I loosened my tie and sat in the darkness. The silence rang in my ears. Then came another knock. 3 slow taps. Only one person knocked like that. I opened the door. My sister, Claire. She looked exhausted. "You look awful," she whispered. "I've had better Mondays." She stepped inside without asking. "You really left?" "I did." She stared at me. "They think you'll come back." "I won't." "Ethan says you're bluffing." "I know." She looked toward the untouched dining table. "You haven't eaten." "I'm not hungry." She walked into the kitchen anyway. After several minutes, she returned with instant noodles. "I remember these." "So do I. We used to eat them before Lumina became successful." I smiled faintly. Back when success still meant something. She placed the bowl before me. "You should tell everyone." "Tell them what?" "The truth." I looked at the steam rising from the noodles. "The truth isn't useful to people looking for a sacrifice." Claire lowered her eyes. "You protected Ethan again." I didn't answer. Because she was right. For years, Ethan's failures became my overtime. His bad investments became my emergency meetings. His insults became jokes everyone pretended not to hear. Every time Father demanded unity, I chose silence. Claire suddenly asked, "Do you remember your birthday last year?" I laughed softly. No. Exactly. You missed your own dinner because Ethan crashed another project. She hesitated. Do you know what father said after you fixed everything? I already knew, but I let her say it. He said, that's what Adrian is supposed to do. The words settled heavily between us. Not because they hurt, because they no longer could. Claire reached into her handbag. I wasn't supposed to give you this. She handed me a sealed envelope. It's from Grandpa. My heartbeat slowed. Grandpa had died 8 months ago. Father handled everything after the funeral. I thought all his papers were settled. So did I. She swallowed. He left this with Mr. Dawson, his lawyer. He said only to give it to you if you ever left the family. My fingers paused above the envelope. For the first time that day, I felt genuine curiosity. The envelope was thick, not with money, with handwritten pages. Grandpa's handwriting was unmistakable, steady, deliberate, every letter carefully formed. I unfolded the first page. Adrian, if you're reading this, then you finally chose yourself. My chest tightened. Claire quietly stood. I'll wait outside. No. I looked up. Stay. She nodded and sat across from me. I continued reading. Your father believes inheritance is measured by buildings. He is wrong. The greatest inheritance is knowing when to leave people who only value what you can carry for them. I stopped breathing for a second. Grandpa had known. Had he seen everything? The second page answered without asking. You always cleaned up after everyone. I admired your strength. I feared your loyalty. A memory surfaced. Grandpa sitting beneath the old oak tree behind the family estate. One day, he had told me, being dependable will become the excuse people use to exploit you. I had laughed back then. Now I couldn't. Claire wiped her eyes. He always understood you. I turned another page. Inside was a list. Not family assets. Not property. Names. 23 names. Former executives. Suppliers. Researchers. Factory managers. People who had quietly resigned from Lumina over the past decade. Each name had a short note beside it. Still trustworthy. Forced out. Knows the original technology. Waiting for someone honest. At the bottom, Grandpa had written one final sentence. You were never the company's greatest asset. People who believed in you were. A sharp knock interrupted the silence. Claire frowned. Who knows you're here? No one. Another knock. Harder this time. I opened the door. 2 men in dark suits stood outside. One flashed an identification card. Economic Crimes Division. My apartment suddenly felt much smaller. We have several questions regarding Lumina Group. Claire immediately stepped forward. My brother resigned today. We know. The older investigator looked directly at me. We're not here to arrest you. Then why are you here? He studied my expression for a long moment. Because someone inside your company erased financial records less than an hour after your resignation. My heartbeat remained steady. I no longer work there. We know. Then why tell me? Because whoever did it expected the blame to remain with you. The younger investigator handed me a business card. If you remember anything, call. I accepted it. Nothing more. Nothing less. They left. Claire shut the door. Ethan. I know. He'll ruin everything. He already has. She stared at me. Why aren't you angry? I thought about it. Really thought. 10 years ago, maybe I would have been. 5 years ago, definitely. Today, I simply felt empty. Because anger would make me run back. And I won't. The next morning, every news channel carried the same story. Former executive Adrian Rowan suspected in Lumina investigation. My phone exploded with messages. Some insulting. Some demanding explanations. Some begging for help. I turned it off. Then another phone rang. The old landline. Almost no one knew the number. I answered. Hello. A warm, elderly voice replied. Mr. Rowan? Speaking. My name is Victor Dawson. Grandpa's lawyer. I've been waiting many years to make this call. I'm listening. There is something your grandfather never placed in his will. I frowned. What? A promise. Silence. He instructed me that if you ever chose to leave Lumina voluntarily, not by force, not through anger, but by your own decision, I was to introduce you to several people. What people? The ones who built the company's foundation before your father pushed them out. I looked again at Grandpa's handwritten list. So they're still together? They never stopped believing someone would come. I don't know if that someone is me. Mr. Dawson chuckled softly. Your grandfather believed otherwise. Before hanging up, he added one sentence. Oh, and Mr. Rowan. Yes. Your father called me this morning. What did he want? He demanded to know whether your grandfather left you anything. I waited. I told him the truth. What truth? Nothing that belonged to him. The call ended. I stood by the apartment window. Across the street, the city's skyline shimmered beneath pale morning light. For the first time in years, there was no schedule waiting for me. No emergency meeting. No family crisis. No brother expecting another rescue. Only a choice. Behind me, Claire quietly asked, "What are you going to do now?" I folded Grandpa's letter with great care and slipped it back into the envelope. Then I looked toward the sunrise beyond the towers that had once defined my life. "I'm going to find out," I said softly, "what I can build when I'm no longer carrying people who refuse to walk on their own." Far below, a black sedan slowed to a stop across the street. Its windows were too dark to see inside, but someone was watching my apartment, and they had been there long before dawn. The black sedan was still there when the sun climbed above the skyline. I watched it through a narrow gap in the curtains. Whoever sat inside never stepped out, never looked at a phone, never smoked, just waited. Claire stood beside me, arms folded. "You know them?" "No. You don't seem surprised." "I've spent 10 years around people who never asked questions directly." She looked again toward the street. "You think Father sent them?" "I think Father never sends only one person." The sedan finally pulled away. Not because I opened the door. Not because I confronted them. It simply disappeared into the morning traffic. I made coffee for the first time in months. The bitter aroma filled the apartment, replacing the stale scent of forgotten takeout containers. Strange. This apartment finally felt lived in. A knock came again. This time it was gentle. Victor Dawson stood outside carrying a weathered leather briefcase. His white hair had thinned since Grandpa's funeral, but his eyes remained sharp. "May I come in?" "Of course." He sat without ceremony and placed the briefcase on the coffee table. "I'll get straight to the point." He opened it. Inside were old project files, employee records, contracts dating back nearly 15 years. Claire leaned closer. "What are these?" "The people your grandfather trusted." He slid one photograph toward me. 23 men and women stood inside an unfinished factory, smiling despite dusty clothes. Grandpa stood in the middle. Beside him, me, barely 23 years old. Before suits. Before boardrooms. Before family politics. "They built Lumina," Victor said quietly. "Not your father." I remained silent. "Your father became chairman after investors arrived. He removed nearly everyone who disagreed with him." Claire whispered. "I never knew." "You weren't supposed to." Victor handed me another folder. "These people never retired. They scattered. They started small businesses. They became consultants. They waited. For what? For someone who remembered what Lumina used to be." Silence settled over the room. Victor watched me carefully. "Your grandfather believed companies are built by trust. Your father believed they're built by control. And you?" I looked at the photograph. "I don't know anymore." Victor smiled faintly. "Good." I frowned. "Good. The worst leaders already think they know." 3 hours later, we met the first person on Grandpa's list. An old machine workshop sat on the edge of the industrial district. Oil stained the concrete floor. Metal sparks danced through the air. A broad-shouldered man switched off a cutting machine as we entered. He stared at me for several long seconds, then laughed. "I knew you'd come eventually, Mr. Leong." He ignored the handshake I offered. Instead, he hugged me so hard my ribs protested. "You've gotten thinner." "I've gotten older." "So have I." His laughter faded. "You finally left them." Word traveled fast. "You knew?" "Your grandfather expected this day years ago." He led us into a modest office. Tea was already waiting. "So," he said, "what did your father take this time?" "My position." Mr. Leong snorted. "He should have tried taking your patience." Claire smiled despite herself. Mr. Leong opened a cabinet. Inside were blueprints, patents, prototype designs. I kept these. I examined them carefully. "These are the energy systems we abandoned." "We didn't abandon them." His expression hardened. "Your father did." "They would have taken years." He wanted quarterly profits. The words landed heavily. How many decisions had I defended? Without knowing the full story? Mr. Leong leaned back. "You always cleaned up after bad decisions. You never asked who made them." He wasn't accusing me. That somehow hurt more. Before I could answer, the office television interrupted us. Breaking news. Every channel carried identical footage. Police officers entered Lumina headquarters. Employees crowded the lobby. Reporters shouted questions. Then Ethan appeared, sweating, forcing a smile. I assure everyone this investigation has nothing to do with our company. A reporter shouted. Then why were accounting servers erased? Ethan froze, only for half a second, enough for everyone watching to notice. Mr. Liang switched off the television. They're panicking. I said nothing. For years, panic inside Lumina had meant my phone ringing every 5 minutes. Today, it remained silent. The silence felt louder than any emergency meeting. That evening, my phone finally lit up. Father. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then again. Then a third time. Claire looked at me. You're not answering? No. What if it's important? If it's important, he'll learn to leave a message. He did. One sentence. Come home immediately. Nothing more. No greeting. No concern. No apology. Only an order. I deleted it. The next morning, someone was waiting outside my apartment building. Not security. Not investigators. Mother. She stood beside her car with dark circles beneath her eyes, clutching a handbag as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. When she saw me, relief flashed across her face. There you are. I nodded politely. Mom. She stepped closer. You've stopped answering. I know. We need to talk. I don't. Her expression faltered. Adrian. Just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We walked to a nearby park where children chased pigeons across the stone paths. The ordinary scene felt strangely distant from everything happening around us. Mother finally spoke. Your father hasn't slept. I remained quiet. Ethan barely leaves the office. Still nothing. They need you. There it was. Not. We miss you. Not. Are you all right? Only. They need you. I looked toward the small lake. For 10 years. I heard those words every week. She lowered her eyes. You know your brother isn't capable of handling this alone. I know. Then why won't you help? The question came so naturally that it almost made me smile. Because helping never solved the real problem. It only delayed it. Mother's lips trembled. This is still your family. I haven't forgotten. Then come home. I turned to face her. When was the last time you visited me without asking for something? Her mouth opened, then closed. When was the last time father called because he wanted to know if I was happy? Silence. When was the last time Ethan apologized? She couldn't answer. Not because she didn't want to. Because there wasn't an answer. Tears welled in her eyes. I failed you. The words were barely audible. For the first time in years. She wasn't defending anyone. She was simply tired. I softened my voice. You did. She flinched. But that doesn't mean I hate you. I just can't carry everyone anymore. She began crying quietly. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just the exhausted tears of someone finally facing a truth she'd avoided for years. Before leaving, she hesitated. Your father doesn't know I came. I figured. He still thinks you'll return. I looked at the clear morning sky. He'll have to learn otherwise. She nodded once, then walked away looking much older than when she'd arrived. 2 days later, Victor Dawson invited me to an old riverside warehouse. The building looked abandoned from outside. Inside, it buzzed with conversation. 23 people. Every name from Grandpa's letter. Some older, some grayer, none broken. As I entered, every conversation stopped. An elderly woman stepped forward. You remembered us. I didn't know where to find you. But you came. Another man laughed. That's enough. Mr. Liang clapped my shoulder. Everyone. This is Adrian. An older engineer interrupted. We already know who he is. We're more interested in who he has become. The room fell silent again. I looked around. These weren't people waiting for revenge. They were people who had rebuilt their lives after being discarded. Victor broke the silence. No one here expects you to replace Lumina. No one expects you to rescue anyone. We invited you because your grandfather believed leadership begins only after obligation ends. His words lingered. For years I had confused responsibility with self-sacrifice. Perhaps they had never been the same thing. A young woman entered carrying several folders. She couldn't have been older than 30. Victor smiled. Adrian, I'd like you to meet Elena Wu. She extended her hand confidently. I've heard a lot about you. I hope not all of it was bad. She laughed. Actually, the opposite. She placed a folder before me. Inside were market reports, investment proposals, research partnerships. Our small companies have been cooperating quietly for years. We don't have Lumina's size. We do have trust. I looked around the room once more. No one pleaded with me. No one demanded anything. No one expected me to save them. For the first time in a decade, People were offering to build something with me, not on me. Before I could respond, Victor's phone rang. His expression darkened after only a few seconds. He looked directly at me. They've issued an emergency board meeting. Claire frowned. So, Victor slowly lowered the phone. They're voting to place full legal responsibility for the financial scandal on Adrian. The room became deathly quiet. No one panicked. No one shouted. Mr. Leong simply folded his arms. So, they've finally decided to burn the bridge they still needed. Outside, thunder rolled across the afternoon sky. And somewhere inside Lumina Tower, my family was preparing to destroy the last shield that had protected them for 10 years. Thunder shook the windows of the warehouse just as Victor ended the call. No one spoke immediately. The silence carried more weight than outrage ever could. Finally, Mr. Leong exhaled. They're desperate. Elena slid the board meeting notice across the table. Someone had forwarded it anonymously. The agenda contained only 3 items. Emergency financial review. Leadership transition. Assignment of legal responsibility. My name appeared beneath the last item. Claire's fingers tightened around the paper. They're trying to make you the only culprit. I know. She looked at me in disbelief. That's all you have to say? What else should I say? They're destroying your reputation. I met her eyes calmly. They've been doing that for years. The room remained quiet. Victor finally asked, will you attend? No. Several heads turned. Mr. Leong frowned. You won't defend yourself? I've defended them for 10 years. I'm done. No one argued. Instead, Elena watched me with thoughtful eyes. You already know something. I know panic makes people careless. She nodded slowly. Then we'll wait. Across town, Lumina Tower looked like a fortress under siege. Television crews crowded the entrance. Shareholders rushed through revolving doors. Employees whispered in every hallway. Inside the boardroom, Ethan slammed both hands against the conference table. Where is he? Father's face remained rigid. He'll come. He has to. He always comes. No one noticed the irony. Not even Father. By afternoon, every financial news outlet carried the same headline. Former executive refuses to attend emergency hearing. Commentators debated my silence. Some called it guilt. Others called it strategy. I ignored all of them. Instead, I sat with Elena in a modest office overlooking the river. She opened a laptop. I've been studying Lumina for years. You expected this? I expected instability. She enlarged several financial charts. Ethan borrowed heavily. I suspected. He used shell companies. I didn't know that. She looked surprised. You truly weren't involved? If I had known, you would have stopped him. Yes. And that's exactly why he hid it from you. The realization settled between us. For years, Ethan hadn't merely ignored my advice. He had deliberately worked around me. He hadn't wanted help. He had wanted freedom from accountability. Elena clicked another file. Someone inside Lumina has been sending anonymous documents to regulators. I leaned forward. Who? We don't know. But they're high enough to access executive records. Claire looked up. So someone inside finally turned against them. Victor smiled faintly. Or someone finally stopped protecting them. Late that evening, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I answered. Hello. Heavy breathing. Then Ethan. You planned this. No. You walked away because you knew. I warned you. You wanted me to fail. I wanted you to listen. His breathing became ragged. You have to come back. There it was. Not please. Not I'm sorry. Only need. You've managed before. Because you've fixed everything. I closed my eyes. Exactly. His voice cracked. They're asking questions I can't answer. You should answer honestly. They'll destroy me. No. I replied quietly. You already started that yourself. He shouted my name. I ended the call. For several seconds, I stared at the dark screen. I didn't feel victorious. Only sad. A man who had mistaken rescue for entitlement was finally discovering the difference. The following morning, investigators officially entered Lumina's finance department. This time they carried sealed evidence boxes. Employees watched from behind glass walls. One accountant quietly walked out carrying a cardboard box of personal belongings. Another refused to speak to reporters. Inside the warehouse, Victor received another message. He read it twice before looking at me. The anonymous source has delivered more evidence. What kind? Audio recordings. Claire frowned. Meetings. Victor nodded. Ethan instructing executives to alter reports. No one looked at me. They already knew what I wouldn't say. If I had still been at Lumina, those recordings would never have existed, because everyone would have expected me to clean up the mess before investigators arrived. Rain fell steadily over the city that evening. Elena drove while I watched blurred lights slide across the windshield. "You've barely spoken all day." "I've been thinking." "About Lumina?" "No, about myself." She glanced at me briefly. "That's new." "It is." For years, every thought had begun with someone else's crisis. Now silence left room for questions I'd never allowed myself to ask. Who was I, without responsibility chained to my name? They stopped outside a quiet restaurant near the river. Inside, only a handful of tables were occupied. Mr. Leong was already waiting. So was an elderly woman I didn't recognize. Victor introduced us. "This is Professor May." She had once served as Lumina's chief research director. Father had forced her retirement years ago. She smiled warmly. "I've wanted to meet you outside that company. I wish it had happened sooner." "So do I." Dinner remained simple. No one discussed revenge. No one celebrated Lumina's troubles. Instead, they talked about ideas. New technology, ethical manufacturing, young engineers needing mentors. I found myself listening more than speaking. It felt peaceful. Professor May suddenly asked, "Do you know why your grandfather admired you?" I assumed because I worked hard. She shook her head. "No. He admired you because you never chased credit." I smiled faintly. That quality nearly destroyed me. Only because you offered it to the wrong people. Her words lingered long after dinner ended. 3 days later, Claire rushed into my apartment without knocking. Her face had gone pale. "You need to see this." She turned on the television. A live press conference filled the screen. Father stood behind a podium surrounded by lawyers. His expression remained controlled. "For the sake of transparency, the company has concluded that all disputed financial decisions were made independently by former Executive Vice President Adrian Rowan." Questions erupted instantly. One reporter shouted, "Do you have evidence?" Father lifted a document. "We do." My eyes narrowed. Even from the television screen, I recognized the signature. Mine. But something felt wrong. Claire whispered, "That's forged." Victor, who had arrived moments earlier, stepped closer. "It is." "How can you tell?" "Because I notarized every executive authorization for 12 years. He pointed toward the document. "The date format is incorrect." I looked carefully. He was right. Someone had copied my signature. But not my documentation style. A mistake so small most people would never notice. Victor immediately picked up his phone. "I'm calling the investigators." That afternoon, another surprise arrived. The anonymous whistleblower requested a meeting. Not with police. With me. The message contained only one address. An old parking garage. Claire immediately objected. "It could be a trap." "It could." Elena folded her arms. "You're still going?" "Yes. I'll come." "So will I," Mr. Leong said. Victor shook his head. "Too many people will scare them." In the end, Elena and I went alone. The parking garage was nearly empty. A single figure stood beside a gray sedan, wearing a hooded jacket. As we approached, the person removed the hood. I stopped walking. "You?" I knew her. Nina, Ethan's executive assistant. For years, she had attended every major meeting. She looked exhausted. "I don't have much time." "Why contact me?" "Because I can't watch this anymore." She handed me a small encrypted drive. "Ethan ordered me to destroy everything." I couldn't. "What's on it?" "Emails. Financial transfers. Recorded calls." She swallowed hard. "And one video." "What video?" "The night your father and Ethan decided to make you the scapegoat." A cold wind swept through the open levels of the garage. Nina looked over her shoulder nervously. "They know someone betrayed them. They're looking for me." Before I could ask another question, headlights appeared at the entrance ramp. 3 black SUVs rolled slowly into the garage. Nina's face drained of color. "They found me." She thrust the drive into my hand. "Don't let them bury the truth." The SUV doors swung open almost simultaneously. Men in dark suits stepped out, scanning every level. Elena grabbed my arm. "We have to move." I tightened my grip around the encrypted drive. For the first time since walking away from Lumina, the truth wasn't just waiting to surface. It was now in my hands. The first man spotted us before we reached the stairwell. "There!" His shout echoed through the concrete structure. Elena didn't hesitate. "Run!" Footsteps thundered behind us. I wasn't running because I was afraid. I was running because the small encrypted drive in my hand carried the truth Grandpa had hoped would someday be seen. We burst through a heavy fire door onto the stairwell. Another pair of footsteps came from below. "They're cutting us off," Elena said. She glanced upward. Roof. We climbed 2 flights at a time. My lungs burned. The men behind us gained ground. At the rooftop exit, Elena slammed the metal door open. Wind whipped across the empty concrete roof. There was nowhere else to go. The city stretched endlessly around us. The suited men emerged one after another. 6 of them. None wore company badges. One stepped forward. "We're not here to hurt you." I looked at him. "People who say that usually are." His jaw tightened. "We only want the drive." "I don't." Another man took a step. "Mr. Rowan, you're making this harder than necessary." Elena quietly moved beside me. "You'll have to go through both of us." The lead man sighed. Then, police sirens. Loud. Close. Every suited man turned instinctively. 2 patrol cars raced into the parking structure below. Someone had called them. The men scattered immediately. Within seconds, they disappeared through different stairwells. Elena let out a slow breath. "I guess someone still believes in good timing." I looked toward the rooftop door. No, I already knew. Nina did. She had planned for this. Back at Victor Dawson's office, the encrypted drive sat on the conference table. No one touched it for several moments. Finally, Victor spoke. "We open it together." I nodded. The files filled the screen. Hundreds of emails. Bank transfers. Internal memos. Audio recordings. Then, the video. Victor pressed play. The footage came from a security camera inside Father's private office. The timestamp was 6 weeks before my resignation. Father sat behind his desk. Ethan paced nervously. "The regulators are getting closer," Ethan said. Father remained calm. "So, they'll investigate everything." Father folded his hands. "Not everything." "What do you mean?" A long silence followed. Then Father spoke the sentence that froze the room. "If necessary, we let Adrian take responsibility." No one in Victor's office moved. On the screen, Ethan looked uncertain. But he didn't approve those deals. "He won't fight us." Father answered without emotion. "He never has." The video continued. "What if he finally refuses?" Ethan asked. Father actually smiled. "He won't. He's loyal. He mistakes obedience for love." The recording ended. No one spoke. Claire covered her mouth. Tears rolled silently down her face. Victor slowly removed his glasses. "I worked beside your father for 25 years. I've never seen him look so empty." I stared at the blank screen. The pain wasn't sharp. It was strangely quiet. The deepest wounds rarely arrived with shouting. They came with certainty. For 10 years. Father had never believed I would leave. Nina had also included dozens of accounting records. Professor May examined them carefully. "They're authentic." Elena nodded. "So are the transfers." Mr. Leong leaned over the table. "Ethan moved company money into shell corporations." Victor pointed toward another document. "And your father authorized nearly every transaction." Claire whispered. "They really did this." No one answered. Because there was nothing left to deny. That evening, the investigators returned. This time they weren't asking questions. They were collecting evidence. The lead investigator watched the video in complete silence. When it ended, he looked directly at me. "You could have released this immediately." "I could have." "Why didn't you?" I thought for a moment. "Because I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth." He nodded once. Truth usually takes longer. Before leaving, he carefully placed the encrypted drive into an evidence case. This changes everything. 48 hours later, the country woke to breaking news. Criminal investigation expands into Lumina Group leadership. Police vehicles surrounded headquarters before sunrise. Employees gathered outside in stunned silence. No one knew who would be taken away first. Father insisted on holding another press conference. This one was broadcast live. His lawyers stood behind him. His confidence remained intact. Lumina Group has always acted with integrity. The conference room doors opened. Every camera turned. The lead investigator entered with 2 officers. The room fell silent. "Mr. Rowan." Father frowned. "This is hardly appropriate." The investigator unfolded a warrant. "It is. You are being formally questioned regarding financial fraud, destruction of evidence, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." Gasps swept across the room. Father's face finally changed. Only slightly, but enough. The comm mask cracked. One reporter shouted, "Did you frame your own son?" Another yelled, "Is the leaked video authentic?" Microphones surged forward. Father tried to speak. No words came. At the same moment, officers entered Ethan's office. He was already packing. A suitcase stood beside his desk. He looked at the warrant, then at the window, then back again. So, it's over. No one answered. He didn't resist. The video spread across every major news network within hours. Commentators replayed father's words repeatedly. He won't fight us. He's loyal. We let Adrian take responsibility. Public opinion shifted almost instantly. The same people who had condemned me now demanded answers from Lumina's leadership. Yet I didn't appear on television. I declined every interview, every invitation, every exclusive statement. Elena looked puzzled. You could clear your name publicly. My name doesn't need applause. It needs peace. She smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. 3 days later, I returned to Lumina Tower. Not as an executive, not as a son, simply as myself. Employees stopped working when I entered. Some lowered their heads. Others looked ashamed. An elderly janitor approached quietly. I owe you an apology. You don't. I believe the news. I know. He hesitated. You always thanked us. None of the others did. I smiled gently. Take care of yourself. He nodded with watery eyes. The boardroom looked smaller than I remembered. Empty chairs surrounded the polished table. The projector remained dark. For years this room had dictated every hour of my life. Now, it felt like any other room. The remaining independent directors stood as I entered. One elderly director bowed his head. We failed you. No, I answered calmly. You failed the company. The distinction mattered. Another director swallowed hard. We would like you to return as chairman. The room waited. So many years ago, that offer would have meant everything. Today, it meant almost nothing. I looked through the glass wall overlooking the city. I won't return. Shock spread across every face. But without you, you'll have to learn what responsibility actually means. The chairman's seat remained empty behind me. I didn't even look at it. I turned toward the exit. Just before reaching the door, I stopped. Lumina doesn't need another man who sacrifices himself. It needs people willing to tell each other the truth before disaster forces them to. Then I walked out. This time, no one tried to stop me. Far below, reporters waited outside the building, hoping for a dramatic statement. I simply passed them by. Behind me, the empire I had carried for 10 years finally stood on its own. Whether it survived would no longer be my burden. The first Monday after I declined Lumina's offer felt unnaturally quiet. No emergency calls, no shareholder meetings, no frantic messages demanding impossible solutions. Instead, I stood inside the old riverside warehouse with a cup of tea, watching sunlight filter through the dusty windows. The building no longer looked abandoned. Workbenches had been cleaned. Whiteboards covered one wall. Young engineers discussed designs while veteran technicians corrected them with patient smiles. There was no shouting, no politics, only work. Elena walked over carrying a stack of folders. I thought you'd be here before everyone else. I've spent 10 years arriving early. I wasn't sure I knew how to stop. She handed me one folder. Inside were proposals from the small companies Grandpa's old colleagues had built over the years. None of them were giants. But together, they formed something remarkable. A network built on trust rather than fear. Victor joined us with a faint smile. I have news. Good or bad? The best kind. He placed a letter on the table. It was from the Economic Crimes Division. The investigation had officially cleared me of all wrongdoing. Every allegation against me had been withdrawn. I read the final sentence twice. Mr. Adrian Rowan is recognized as having repeatedly attempted to prevent the unlawful activities under investigation. Claire, who had arrived moments earlier, hugged me tightly. You deserve this. I smiled. I deserved peace. The letter is just paperwork. She laughed through damp eyes. I'll take both. That afternoon, everyone gathered around a long wooden table inside the warehouse. Mr. Leong tapped a spoon against his teacup. I've hated formal meetings for 20 years. Laughter rippled through the room. So let's keep this simple. He looked at me. What do you want to build? 23 pairs of eyes turned toward me. For years, questions like that had terrified me. Not because I lacked answers. Because every answer had to satisfy someone else's ambition. This time, the answer belonged to me. I don't want another empire. Silence settled. I want a company people don't need to recover from. Professor May smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. I continued. We'll grow slowly. We'll refuse projects that compromise our principles. We'll share credit. We'll train young people. And if success comes, It won't belong to one family. It'll belong to everyone who helped build it. No one applauded. No one cheered. They simply nodded, as if the words described something they had been waiting to hear for years. Victor quietly whispered, "Your grandfather would have been proud." For the first time since his funeral, I believed that might actually be true. The company needed a name. Suggestions filled the whiteboard. Most sounded too ambitious, too polished, too much like Lumina. Then Claire picked up a marker. She wrote one word: harbor. Everyone looked at her. "When storms come," she said softly, "people don't need a palace. They need somewhere safe." No one erased it. By evening, the new company had a name: Harbor Technologies. 3 months passed. Harbor Technologies occupied only 2 renovated floors of the warehouse. Compared to Lumina's skyscrapers, it looked insignificant. Yet every morning, the building filled with quiet determination. Former employees who had once feared speaking in meetings now debated ideas openly. Young graduates worked beside veterans without worrying about titles. No reserved executive parking. No private dining room. No oversized offices. When visitors asked where the CEO's office was, they usually walked past mine without noticing. I preferred it that way. One rainy afternoon, Elena knocked lightly on my open door. "You have a visitor." I wasn't expecting anyone. "You definitely weren't." I stepped outside. Mother stood near the reception desk. She looked healthier than the last time I had seen her. Still tired, but different. Less afraid. She smiled cautiously. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "You're not." She looked around. "This is beautiful." I followed her gaze. Engineers laughed over a failed prototype. Someone accidentally spilled coffee, and 3 others helped clean it without blame or embarrassment. It doesn't feel like a corporation. It isn't. It's a workplace. She nodded slowly. "I finally understand." "Understand what?" She looked at me with quiet regret. "You were never asking for recognition. You were asking to be treated like family." Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she reached into her handbag. "I brought something." It was an old photograph. Grandpa, Claire, me, Mother, even Father and Ethan. Taken before success had changed everyone. I found it while packing. Packing. I moved out. I looked up in surprise. She smiled sadly. "Your father and I, we're living separate lives now." She didn't sound angry, only relieved. "I should have left years ago." I gently took her hand. "It's never too late." Tears filled her eyes again. This time, they weren't tears of helplessness. They were tears of acceptance. Before leaving, she paused at the entrance. "I don't expect forgiveness. I know, but I'd like to earn a place in your life again." I nodded. "Then don't promise anything. Just keep showing up." She smiled. "I can do that." As she walked away, I realized healing wasn't a single conversation. It was many ordinary moments, patiently built over time. That evening, Harbor celebrated its first successful international partnership. Nothing extravagant, just homemade food, laughter, and speeches no one had prepared. Mr. Leong raised a teacup. To Adrian. I immediately shook my head. No. To everyone who stopped carrying people who refused to walk. The room fell silent. Then every cup rose together. I looked around the table. No one here expected me to sacrifice myself. No one mistook kindness for obligation. For the first time in my adult life, success didn't feel heavy. It felt shared. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, reflecting across the river that flowed quietly beside the warehouse. The future no longer looked like something I had to survive. It looked like something I was finally free to build. The summons arrived on a quiet autumn morning. Not from Lumina, not from the board, from the court. I turned the envelope over in my hands while sunlight stretched across the wooden table in Harbor's shared kitchen. Claire read the return address and frowned. "Do you have to go?" "Yes." Her expression tightened. "Are they trying to drag you back into the case?" "No." I opened the letter carefully. Father had requested my testimony regarding the internal decision-making process that led to the attempted cover-up. Claire let out a slow breath. "He wants you there." I read the final line. "Your presence may assist in establishing the full context of the events under investigation." The words were formal, but the meaning underneath them was simple. After all this time, the truth still needed a witness. Elena entered carrying coffee and immediately sensed the shift in the room. "What happened?" I handed her the letter. She read it silently, then looked up. "You don't have to carry him." "I'm not." I folded the summons. "I'm just going to tell the truth." The courthouse was crowded with reporters by the time I arrived. Cameras flashed. Questions flew from every direction. Mr. Rowan, do you blame your father? Will you testify against your brother? Do you think Lumina can recover? I kept walking. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than the morning air outside. Father sat beside his attorneys. Ethan sat several seats away, thinner than I remembered. Neither of them looked at me when I entered. The judge called my name. I took the stand. After the oath, the prosecutor began with simple questions. Please state your relationship to the defendants. Adrian Rowan, son of Daniel Rowan, brother of Ethan Rowan, and your former role at Lumina Group? Executive Vice President. The questions moved slowly through my years at the company. My responsibilities. The warnings I had given. The meetings where I raised concerns. I answered each one plainly. No speeches. No accusations. No dramatics. Then the prosecutor asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Did you authorize the financial transfers currently under investigation? No. Were you aware of them before the investigation began? No. Did you attempt to warn company leadership about the risks of those activities? Yes. The prosecutor displayed one of my earlier memos on the courtroom screen. It showed a detailed risk assessment I had submitted months before the scandal broke. Father finally looked at me. For the first time in years, his expression was not commanding. It was searching, as if he were trying to understand when the son he relied upon had become someone he could no longer control. The prosecutor played the video recording. Father's own voice filled the courtroom. If necessary, we let Adrian take responsibility. A heavy silence followed. The prosecutor turned to me. How did hearing those words affect you? I considered the question carefully. It hurt. I paused, but it also clarified something. What did it clarify? That loyalty without honesty is not love. No one moved. The words settled over the courtroom with quiet finality. After the testimony, the judge called a recess. I stepped into a small hallway outside the courtroom. For several minutes, I stood alone beside a window overlooking the city. Then footsteps approached. Father stopped several feet away. He looked older than he had during the investigation. Smaller, somehow. Not physically, but in certainty. Adrian. I nodded. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he said, You testified honestly. Yes. Another silence. I used to think strength meant keeping the family together. I looked at him. And now? He stared at the floor. Now I think I confused control with protection. I didn't answer immediately. He continued quietly. I depended on you too much. Yes. I expected too much. Yes. His voice roughened. I don't know how to apologize for 10 years. I thought about that. Then I answered honestly. You probably can't. He nodded. I know. He looked up at me, eyes tired. But I am sorry. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The apology did not erase the past. It did not repair every wound. But it was the first true thing I had heard from him in a very long time. I hear you, I said. That was all I could offer. And for now, it was enough. The final ruling came several weeks later. The court found both Father and Ethan responsible for their roles in the financial fraud, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy to assign false responsibility. The sentences were serious. The fines were severe. Lumina Group was ordered into a major restructuring process under independent supervision. The headlines lasted for days. Then the news cycle moved on. As it always does, I did not attend the final sentencing. Instead, I spent that morning at Harbor's workshop helping a young engineer troubleshoot a failed prototype. He looked embarrassed when the device refused to start. I must have made a mistake. I smiled. Good. He blinked. Good. Mistakes are useful when you're allowed to admit them. He laughed softly. That sounds obvious. It should be. I handed him a screwdriver. Try again. Around us, the workshop buzzed with ordinary work. Someone argued about design specifications. Someone else played music too quietly to identify. Claire reviewed documents at a nearby table. Elena spoke with a supplier by the window. Nothing about the scene looked dramatic. That was precisely why it mattered. For years, I had lived inside emergencies. Now I was building a life that did not require constant rescue. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I walked alone to the riverside. The water moved steadily beneath the fading light. I thought about the title people had given my story in the newspapers. The loyal son, the scapegoat, the executive who walked away. None of those names captured the truth completely. The truth was quieter. For 10 years, I had believed my worth came from how much I could endure for others. When I stopped enduring, I discovered that my worth had never depended on their approval. Footsteps approached behind me. Elena stopped beside me, hands in her coat pockets. Everyone's looking for you. I know. She smiled. They wanted to celebrate. We can celebrate tomorrow. She looked out over the river. Do you regret leaving? I considered the question. No, not even a little. I smiled. I regret staying as long as I did. She nodded, understanding. After a moment, she asked, what do you want now? I watched the water catch the last light of sunset. Ordinary things, such as a company where people can speak honestly, a home that doesn't feel like an obligation, friends who don't need me to save them. She laughed softly. That's a very ambitious list. Maybe, but it feels possible. We stood there in comfortable silence. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of suppressed anger. The silence of two people watching a river move forward without forcing it to become anything else. Later that night, I returned to harbor one final time before heading home. The workshop lights were off. The building was quiet. I walked through the open workspace slowly, past the shared tables, past the whiteboards covered in ideas, past the small office I still hadn't bothered to decorate. At the entrance, I paused and looked back. 10 years ago, I would have measured success by the size of the building, by the number of employees, by the value of the contracts. Now I measured it differently, by whether people felt safe here, by whether they were respected, by whether they could fail without being discarded. I turned off the final light and stepped outside. The night air was cool. The river moved steadily beside the road. Behind me, harbor rested quietly. Ahead of me, the city lights stretched into the distance. I had walked away from a legacy built on obligation. I had watched the people who depended on that obligation destroy themselves when it was no longer available. And in leaving, I had not lost my future. I had finally gained my own. The road home was peaceful. For the first time in many years, I walked it without carrying anyone else's weight.